I'm Donald King, and I'm going to talk about a specific project that we're working on. And it brings together a large number of studies that Carol and I have been working on.
You're disconnected. Sorry. Oh.
Came right.
Oh, it came off.
There, so I'll hold it. That
He'll help you, though.
This looked out. This is mine. This is the other. Okay. Just maybe tuck the cable in.
Yeah. It involves a large number of readership studies that we've done on academic libraries, and actually starting back to a series of studies I did with the National Science Foundation back in the 1970s. So we have, it has permitted us to do some longitudinal aspects of what has happened with readership and how it's changed with electronic publishing as opposed to print publishing. The other thing is it involves a cost study, in-depth cost study of academic libraries, particularly dealing with the print and electronic collections. I started doing it with Carol Montgomery at Drexel University because she shifted over to an entire electronic journal collection and had collected some data, and then she asked me to come in and help analyze those data. Then I did a similar study at the University of Pittsburgh, where we had both a readership study there and an in-depth cost study that involved the print and electronic collection. It was a good place to do it because at that time the size of the print collection was about exactly the same size of the electronic collection. And when Carol got this and Paula got this project, I asked Carol if it would be possible to go ahead and replicate the Pittsburgh study, because this would give us kind of a picture of what it was like back in the early 2000s and what it is like now. And it has changed. And I was up talking to the people in Pittsburgh on Wednesday, and it has really changed there. So we're going to get a good picture of what things like being able to have external storage for print journals and the electronic collections now, and the things like open access and so on, how that has affected the academic library environment. So we're going to do that, and I do want to emphasize that the way in which we are doing this is just one small piece of the overall Lib-Value study, and it's just that we had this opportunity to do something that we'd never have again, I believe, and it's something that I think will help the overall picture as well. The talk will cover a framework of library evaluation metrics. It will include what Bruce has talked about. I have a little bit different definitions, but not much, and maybe we can get together and resolve that. But the second thing, it'll also show how value and return on investment fits into this framework. And we'll use the academic journal collection as an example, and then describe the detailed methods and used in the past user surveys and the in-depth cost studies. That's what I'm going to talk about today. And I do want to explain the differences between public, special, and academic return on investment. It's just totally different. And some people tend to say it's the same. Now, with public libraries, we've done 2 statewide studies on return on investment in a national study where we had several thousand observations to look at that. First thing is, I think it's important, and Martha mentioned this, and Bruce did as well, and that is that we have to think about, when we do a study of this, we have to think about the different perspectives. One perspective is libraries, another are the users, another is the university and college, and then there's also that external kind of an environment that we have to consider as well, and that's what Bruce was discussing. The other thing is that there has been in the past a lot of very specific kind of metrics. One kind is the input of resources for the library and its outputs. The users, we have the use of that collection. We have the domain, which is in a sense the description of the environment within which the library is operating. And then we have outcomes or value from use. That is, there are different kinds of outcomes that from reading the materials that you have in the library. And then from that we can get a return on investment. We could look at alumni careers. We can look at academic or community outcomes and social benefits, which is the kinds of things that Bruce is focusing on. My approach to this is really what I call a bottom-up approach, and thank goodness we have Bruce here that'll give us this top-down approach, because I think it's so important. Now, examples of the library metrics include the input resources, that is all of the staff, the space, the workstations, and so on, and includes the amount of those resources, such as staff time, the cost of those resources again, which is the staff time, and attributes, which are such things as the staff education. Then the outputs are the amount of output, that is the number of titles processed, for example. The attributes of output would be whether those outputs are electronic or print. Examples of user metrics are the amount of use, that is readings, hits or downloads, items reshelved, kinds of things that Bruce was talking about. But also what kind of a use metric is the type of users and non-users. That is whether it's students or faculty or other professionals in the university, non-university users such as researchers and interlibrary borrows and so on. Factors affecting use are the purpose or reason for using the collection, the Lib-Qual kinds of data that is available, the available alternatives, because people will have to make choices. Are they going to use a journal, or are they going to use a book, or are they going to use some other source to get the information that they want? Their awareness of options. Sometimes they don't even know that. Even now, there are some faculty don't realize they can get their electronic journals from their office. The ease or cost of use is an incredibly important factor that affects whether a service is going to be used or not. And then we can look at the importance of or satisfaction with attributes. That is, again, the electronic format is an attribute, the accessibility of articles, and so on. The user information seeking behavior, that is choosing from available alternatives. Ways articles are identified, whether it's through browsing or searching, where articles are obtained through the libraries or personal subscriptions or colleagues. Examples of outcomes or the value from use include direct outcomes. That is, such things as inspiring new thinking or ideas, improving results, better research design, saving time in the classroom or doing research. Indirect outcomes include such things as improved productivity, improved quality of work, results in more grants, which is what they looked at Illinois. The contingent valuation, that is what it would cost if there were no library. The effects of the university goals in teaching, research, service, student achievement. Now, these are exactly the same kind of things that both Martha and Bruce talked about. Then there are higher order effects, and this is where we get kind of a top-down look. And then there's externalities that Bruce mentioned. Examples of domain metrics are the target population, that is the number out there, the user and non-user characteristics or demographics, the user and non-user information needs and requirements. Now, the thing is, these are all individual or specific measures. And over the, I guess it's almost 50 years now. Oh my God. that I've been doing this stuff is that I find that it's important not only to identify those very specific measures, but to begin to develop relationships among those measures. And for example, we have the specific measures of input resources and the output. But a relationship is the performance, that is relating the input and the output. Then we have the use, the output and the use, and the relationship of the output and use is what I call effectiveness. And then you have the outcomes from use, or the impact of the actually, I didn't use impact for many, many years because there was a famous economist named Fritz Machlup in Princeton, and I used the word impact one time as people use it. He says, that's impact. It took me years before I used that term again. Then we can relate the input resources to use and so on. And then you have the cost effectiveness, which Bruce talked about. Now, examples of the derived metrics, for example, looking at performance, that is relating the input to the output. Hold off just a little bit. And I think of performance as being how well the library performs. One example of the relationship is the cost per unit. That is the cost per electronic or print title that is processed. Productivity is the number of titles processed per hours of staff time and so on. There's all kinds of relationships that you can develop between the inputs and the outputs. And I refer to those as performance. They can be called other things, but it just seems to me that dictates how well the library is performing. I refer to effectiveness a little bit different than what Bruce said, and that is the effect of the library service. And that is, for example, the amount of use per unit, that is the readings per electronic or print title, the distribution of titles read, that is X titles read once, twice, 3 times, and so on. The effect of the accessibility on use, that is, if you can't get access to the information because of the time the library is open or some other aspect of access, then that'll have some effect on use. Cost effectiveness is the effect of the input resources on use. That is the total library cost per use, the purchase cost per use of an electronic or print collection, the cost per student or faculty use, the cost per purpose of use. And I'm going to give some examples of this in a few minutes, actually in about an hour. The impact, the consequences of use is how the purpose of use leads to a direct or indirect outcome. That is X readings by browsing or results in better research. How information seeking relates to the outcomes. That is X readings for research results in X dollars in savings and those kind of things. So you can begin to show what those impact measures are. And cost of benefits, I think of that as such thing as the amount of resources applied on outcomes. That is the return on investment, the outcomes per cost, or the savings per library cost, and so on. Again, I want to emphasize, I look at this as a bottom-up approach as opposed to Bruce's, thank goodness, is going to give us a top-down approach, because I think that is so important. And this is really, it really involves 2 kinds of studies. One is the survey of users and potential users. It also involves the in-depth analysis of the cost of library resources. And that's pretty heavy-duty stuff, by the way. Looking at survey methods, we can survey all the students or faculty or staff. What we have done is surveyed students by asking sampled faculties to distribute the questionnaire at the end of the class, which takes about 10 minutes. And there's some statistical aspects of that you have to be concerned about. Now, Carol has done some student surveys where she gives them a lottery or some kind of a iPod or something like that. I think you've done the same thing. So there's different ways of doing it. I just find that we were pretty successful at Pittsburgh in asking the faculty to have them fill it out, because they always did in their class. Then we survey all the faculty and staff with some parts partitioned into more than one survey. You need to keep these surveys pretty tight because people just won't fill them out. If they get over about 20 minutes to fill them out, they just won't do it. So what we do is have one part of one aspect that we absolutely have to have that information go to every survey that we submit, but there will be other surveys. Part of the surveys will address another part, another survey will address another part. So you have one part that gets everything and another part that gets part of it. And we at Pittsburgh, we actually had 4 surveys like that. It worked out pretty well. The faculty surveys is sometimes done by distributing in university mail, and that's what we did at Pittsburgh back in the early, around 2004, I think it was. And we're doing much more web-based surveys now. And I still like the old distributing the surveys, but I don't think we're going to do that much anymore. It's just too much better doing it the other way. One thing is that a principal method that we have been using since the 70s, as a matter of fact, is by asking about the last article read, and that's a critical incident. And I find that to be extremely helpful to do it that way. As I say, I've been doing that since the 70s, and it's worked out pretty well. Now, some of the questionnaire topics are the number of articles read in the last month. Now, that survey is of the faculty or of the students, and that's the principal unit that we're observing. Then we ask the critical question about the source of the articles that are read, whether it's a journal, it's a article, author website, and this kind of thing. And we ask about the last article that was read. When you do that, you kind of shift to the population being surveyed is readings. It's no longer people. And there's some statistical aspects of that, but I won't get into that stuff. Another question is from the source of how many articles were read in the last year. The reason that we ask that is that it gives us an indication of how broadly people are reading, and it's a quantitative analysis to get that, but it's very important because I'm going to show you that faculty members are reading from a much broader array of kinds of journals and articles than they have in the past. The year the article was published or posted, the time spent reading the last article, how it was initially found, from what source it was read, the time spent searching or accessing the purpose of reading, format when read, the location read, and so on. So you get all of this information on a user survey, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the results of that. The advantage of the critical incident method is that a typical question is to rate your satisfaction with online searches, for example. The problem is that each time you do an online search, the satisfaction's different. So if you do a critical incident, you can begin to get an indication of the times that it wasn't satisfied all the way to the times it was satisfied. It allows one to combine answers through cross-analysis. For example, you can establish the age of articles read from a library versus the personal subscriptions that are read for research or just to keep up. You can get down into a lot of detail by using the critical incident method. It can establish time spent reading for research versus teaching from library versus personal subscriptions, thus providing indicators of the value for the library provided readings. Now, Martha has mentioned this, and Bruce has alluded to this as well. There's kind of a path for beginning to analyze the data that you get from the surveys. The first thing is to identify the purposes for reading articles. That is for research, teaching, current awareness, not comment awareness, but current awareness, and that By knowing the purpose for which the article was read, you can begin to establish what kind of information-seeking behavior takes place in identifying those articles, obtaining them, choosing the format, and so on. Because that's different. You do it differently if you're reading for research than if you're reading for teaching or reading for current awareness. And the information-seeking behavior then leads to the article use. That is, how much it is read, the time spent reading, the age of the articles read, and this kind of thing. That kind of information begins to lead into the outcomes. That is, the value of reading, inspiring new thinking or ideas, increasing productivity. Achievers read more than they get into the continued value. All of those things then lead into what the return on the investment is. We know articles are read for many different purposes. Each purpose leads to a different information-seeking behavior. The principal purpose is, this is just, I'm going to give you some top-line results. What we have found is, for example, this is a studies that Carol and I did in the U.S. and Australia. She oversees all these. I just kind of look at things. But research dominates. And it was always a little surprising to me when I started doing studies of academic libraries. Teaching is around 20% of the readings for teaching, 9% for current awareness, 11% for proposals, and so on. The information-seeking behavior involves choosing from among different information sources. Now, what I mean by that is that a faculty member, if they have an information need, they can go a lot of different places to address that need. And they have to choose what their information sources are going to be. It could be articles, it could be a conference proceeding, it could be some other kind of a source. Establishing ways in which the journal information is identified. Choosing online search sources. If you decide to search, what sources are going to use. Determining where to obtain the articles. That is from a library or from a personal subscription. Picking a location, whether it's from the office or in the library or when you're traveling. One thing I kind of like to do, because I'm a nut about data, is when every time I take a plane flight, I walk down the aisles to see who's reading and what they're reading, this kind of thing. As I mentioned, people can choose a number of different sources for the information we asked the question, I wish I thought I had the question on the top of the PowerPoint, but we asked the question essentially, for the last significant piece of work that you were doing, what information sources did you use? Well, look, almost 94% of them said they used journal articles. Some of them said they used books or websites and so on. They average using about 2.5 sources per incident where they needed this information. But boy, journal articles really dominate. But in a sense, what this does is begin to put a context as to what people are doing in their reading. Reasons for choosing journal articles. This is from a study that Carol has done recently, and what we find is that as far as the attributes are concerned, the article topic is most important. Online accessibility is also important. Interestingly enough, the type of publisher is rated pretty low. And I know there's a lot of people that say if it's a commercial publisher that they won't go to them and this kind of, I don't think that's happening very often. The Authors Institution's another one. Question about how did the faculty first become aware of the information found in articles? Now, what this means is that what we found is that about 50% of the readings, the people knew about the information before they read the article. And so what we wanted to do is find out where when they first became aware of that information in the article. And it usually came from another article such as a citation or something like that, informal discussions with colleagues, conferences, workshops, and so on. So they often knew about the information before they read it, but they went ahead and read it anyway. Ways in which the journal information is identified, about 35% is found by browsing, found by searching from another person, from cited in another publication, and so on. So they identify it from a number of different sources, and this will tell us, give us a pretty good indication of where they're finding their information. They have to choose for online search sources. One of the things that surprised me a bit is that they're still using electronic A&I services quite a bit, more than others. I would have guessed it had been the web search engine such as Google or Yahoo, but it just isn't. Now that may have changed recently, but this is about 2 or 3 years ago. Where the articles obtained. Over 50% of them were obtained from library-provided articles. About a third from personal subscriptions. The authors gave them some free electronic journals, and so on. So you can see, again, the library is playing an extremely important role in providing these journal articles. One of the things that really struck me, again, keeping in mind that I was doing these surveys all the way back into the 1970s, and what we observed is that 37 of about 150 of the readings that took place back in 1977, this is science, by the way, because it was a National Science Foundation study, so that libraries were not used very much back in the 1970s. Looking at it now from 2004 to 2006, we have roughly 150 uses, and over half of those uses are from the libraries. If you look at the difference in the additional amount of use, it went from about 150 up to 250, that about almost all of those additional uses are from libraries, from academic libraries. So they're making a tremendous impact. And I think that's important for the administration to understand. And it's just a little piece of all of this. Now, there are reasons for shifting the reading to the library collections. One is a decrease in personal subscriptions. Not so much in academic. It went from about 4.5 down to 3.5 or so. But there is more reading of articles identified by online bibliographic searches. Very, very few of the articles were read in the 70s from online searching, and now it's up around 60 or 70 of those the readings now are from online searches. The other thing is, one thing that has happened is that the electronic collections have broadened access to the articles. In 1977, again, this is science. Just because we had great data back over those years, is that in 1977, the researchers read an average of 1 article from 13 journals. In other words, there are a bunch of journals, they only read 1 article, but they read at least 1 article from 13 journals. By 2005, it's 33. They have really, really broadened, and I think the electronic collections have helped do that. The format of articles read, 54% is electronic, 46% print. Of the personal subscriptions, 87% of the readings from personal subscriptions are still in print. 72% of the readings from library collections is in electronic. So there's been a real shift over the years, and this is a pretty good indicator of it. One thing that I tell publishers, and particularly author-paid publishers like Public Library of Science and so on, is you got to recognize that if you have personal subscription, you got to keep it in print, because people are really really doing that. Now, walking down the aisles, now some people are reading it on their workstations. Others are reading it in print, but a lot of them are still reading it in print. Now, that's not where I got the data. There's a question about selecting the article format. What format are you going to use? Well, 54% of it is electronic, and most of that is downloaded and printed out. Some of it is reading on the screen, or some of it's printing out and reading out. With print, it's most of it's reading from issue, some of it's reading from photocopies, and some of it's from fax. Picking a location, an awful lot of the reading, about 60% of it now is in office or laboratories. Some of it's at home. Very few, only about 5% of it's being read electronically in the library. Now, there's different aspects of article use. One aspect of that is the amount of reading. How much do you read? We can see that there's been more reading taking place over time, and that a lot of that, almost all of that reading is coming from library collections. Time spent reading is another one. The age of the articles read is a change. I know when we first got an indication of what the age of the articles read from electronic publishing, I thought, boy, this is, since we had JSTOR and the Astronomical Society particularly had a lot of older materials in there, but it hasn't changed much over the years. And it leads to outcomes, but all of this leads to outcomes of reading the value of that information. The trend in number of readings over the years has gone from 150 up. This should be 250, not 280, by the way. So as you can see, just what that trend is, it's just gone up fairly dramatically over time. And you can see that looking at the personal subscriptions, how that has gone down. Library provided articles has gone up. Just another way of looking at it. There are two types of values of articles, and Bruce addressed this in a little bit different way than I'm going to, and that is the purchase value. What are you willing to pay for the information that you get from an article? They pay for in their time. That's a way they pay for it, or in terms of money. In other words, if they get a subscription, they're paying in their money. Otherwise, they're really paying in their time. And believe me, the time dominates the differences there. Then there's the use value. That is the favorable outcome derived from using the article content. The purchase value, average time spent reading is about 7 minutes for browsing, about 5 minutes searching, and about 33 minutes actually reading the articles. The total time per faculty member is around 10 hours browsing, about 6 hours searching, and about 132 hours spent reading. We don't know, we know how many subscriptions they have, we don't know how much they spend on subscriptions. The interesting thing is about the value of time is that the time spent reading per article read has dropped off dramatically. But the reason for that is, if you think about it, people only have a certain amount of time they can spend reading. And they're reading more, they're reading from a broader array of access to journals and this kind of thing. So they're spending less time in the reading that they do. And I think part of that is due to the fact that since they have a broader access to a broader array of journals and articles and so on, that they're kind of browsing through those articles to determine what's in them. The age of the articles read, about 50% of it is read within the first year after publication, and it's kind of like a nuclear decay curve. It just goes on and on and on. And we've gotten some readings that go over 25 years. Time spent reading by purpose is that they spend more time reading for research, only about 22 minutes reading for current awareness and so on. And the use value is one thing is that in 55% of the readings, it inspires new thinking or ideas. It improves results. It changes the focus. It's resulted in faster completion of their work, and it has also wasted my time. An indicator of faculty productivity is that articles, the average number of articles, this is over a 2-year period, by the way, articles published in refereed journals is around 3.8, non-refereed is around 2, and so on. But if you look at the faculty who publish more tend to read more. For example, those who are published authors read an average of 29 articles per month in any publication around, and those who don't, it's around 15 refereed articles. You can see in all of them that those who read more tend to publish more. That's not to be unexpected, really. Achievers read more. One of the things that we have done, going all the way back to the 1970s studies, is we've asked people to indicate whether their work has been recognized through some kind of achievement award or a patent or something of this kind, and we refer to those as achievers. Now, we actually had a Nobel Prize winner in one of these from Bell Labs. But what we find is with the number of readings, the achievers average around 276 reading, the non-achievers around 222. Hours spent reading is achievers 159 hours, non-achievers 119 hours. Time spent reading 35 to 32. So you can see that there is some benefit to those people who are achievers. It doesn't mean that if you read a lot, because I read a lot, but I'm not an achiever. That, you know, what it does mean for those who are achievers, it's important that they have access to those library collections. And actually, we also, on the surveys, we ask them how many times they use a library and this kind of thing, and you get the same kind of correlation between achievers and non-achievers. Now, looking at the University of Pittsburgh Journal collections as an example, back in 2002 to 2004, when we were doing surveys there, what we did is we conducted an in-depth cost analysis of library collections that I mentioned before. We looked at the size of the print and electronic collections were very similar. That was a great advantage to comparing those costs. And we conducted surveys of students, faculty, and staff. And what we're doing now is planning an update of those studies in October to provide a longitudinal comparison and the consequences. It's kind of a unique opportunity. It's only a piece of what they're doing on the Lib-Value. It's not by any means the total. It just gives us a chance to look at something we might not have the opportunity to look at if we didn't do this. The units at Pittsburgh is that the journal collections, where the electronic collection was about 14,000, the unique titles was around 8,500. I know that Martha has struggled with that. How do you count how many titles that you have, because there's so much duplication of the number of sources that you get the journal titles from, that in this case it doesn't quite double it, but it's certainly a lot more. The print collection also was duplicated, but that's because they had, at the University of Pittsburgh, they had 4 other campuses other than the main campus at Pittsburgh. So they had to duplicate some of the print titles as well. And they also had a lot of department libraries at that time, which I think are pretty much gone now. But I think they had 19 on campus. They had something like 19 departmental libraries and or special collections. They have a particularly Asian collection that's pretty unique. At that time, they had about 30,000 students, about 1,700 faculty, and about 750 other professional staff. The study did not include law or medical because those libraries were just totally different. In terms of use, the electronic was around 933,000 a year. Current print was around 130,000. The reading from back files was around 238. The interlibrary lending was 14. The interlibrary borrowing was about 5,000. These are, and when we did the cost study, not only were we looking at the use of these 5 different services are provided from the collections, but we also got the cost of those 5 different services. Now they're looking at the type of cost. We have fixed cost, that is the collection-related functions. The variable cost, that is the annual cost of reshelving, is an example of that. The marginal cost is the incremental cost of each item shelved, is an example. Direct costs are those are identified with the collection services, and then you have indirect costs, which are the support costs that has to be allocated. In other words, we have to look at all those different kind of costs when we're doing the cost analysis. And I think in your handout you have some of the details on this kind of thing. And what we did is looked at the annual cost of the 5 collection services. That is, what were the costs last year of those 5 different services, which are the current periodicals, the back files, the electronic, and so on. We also, when I did the cost analysis at Drexel and at Pittsburgh, the JSTOR people were kind of interested in what we did there. And so they asked me to help them look at the cost of 9 other libraries, academic libraries, included Yale, Cornell, NYU, and then some small libraries like Franklin Marshall and so on. So we got a range of sizes and types of libraries and this kind of thing. And Roger Schoenfeld, who I worked with at JSTOR, insisted that we also look at the life cycle cost of a single electronic or print title. That is, you not only look at what happened this year with the total collection, but look at an individual title that comes in and determine what those costs are over time. With the electronic titles, it involves the renegotiation of licenses and things like this. It used to be every 6 years. Now I think it's shortened, from what I understand, to around 3 years. But with a print title, it's a binding, and it's then you've got to go. It starts out in the current periodical collection, then it goes to the back files, or it's bound and goes to back files, and then you have to keep it up over those 25 years. So I found that to be a pretty helpful way of looking at the cost of the print and the electronic collections. Again, these are the 5 collection services. We don't need to go over that again. And steps in developing the service costs. We list activities performed by the staff at looking at just the staff that's involved with the collections. We identified 67 activities that are performed by that staff. Now, in special libraries where we were looking at all of the things that are performed, we would get up around 125 activities that are performed. We identify other resources involved, such as the staff, the space, the workstations, the systems, and so on. In other words, we have to look at the cost of all of those resources and how they're affected by the electronic and print publications. For example, with space, it's not only just the space that is involved with the shelving, You also have the space that's involved with each of the staff members. You have space that's involved with the workstations that the users use. In other words, you got to look at all of that space and determine what that cost is. Now, the problem with academic libraries is knowing what the space cost is. Some of the 11 libraries that we looked at could tell us what the cost of the space was. For those that couldn't tell us, what we did is determine what the cost of space was around the library. That is, in a business or something like that. Anyway, with the staff time, what we had to do is allocate the staff time to those 67 activities, and I think there's some description of that in your handout. Assign a cost of the staff time, including fringe benefits, including what the fringe benefits are, and then we have an overhead cost as well. For example, the university has administration that you have to allocate to those costs. Then you just sum across the 5 different service components that you have. We have to then analyze the input, the output, and the performance for each of those components. We partition the print staff time to current and backfiled collections because when you're processing the information when it comes in, you have to, some of that is going to, well, a lot of the costs are going to go to the current collection, and some of those costs go to the backfile collection. The way in which we allocated was by the respective use of those 2 kinds of collections. Estimate the amount of use of reading for each of the 5 collections. Allocate all other resources. Perform detailed cost analysis of total and so on. Okay. Why don't we go ahead? I'm just kind of. Why don't we go to the next one? These are the kind of stuff that you have to look at: the collection development, the negotiations, the acquisitions, the receipt processing, the binding, the physical processing, you know, all that stuff. And you gotta look at those costs very carefully, or you're going to misunderstand or misanalyze what those costs really are. With user-related functions, we look at reference and research, the online bibliographic searching, circulation, photocopying that is done, reshelving, and these are all user-related. But you also have support-related functions like the systems, the maintaining statistics, the preparing procedural manuals, and so on. One of the things that we found at both Pittsburgh and in Drexel is that there was a real shift when you went, particularly in Drexel, when you went to electronic, there was a real shift in staff from the processing aspects of it and the non-professional aspects to the doing things like user instruction and bibliographic instruction. Those kinds of things became very important, and so there as it turns out, there was a real shift in the type of staff that was necessary and the kind of work that was being done. Looking at an example, the cost of collection services, you have the purchase of the electronic and current and back files. You have the staff costs. The staff costs and the purchase costs are about the same. Then you have binding for the back file, you have photocopying, workstation systems, and so on. But you can see that the total cost of the electronic collection was about $2.7 million. The total cost for the print collection was around $5.4 million, roughly. So it's a whole lot more expensive. Looking at the 25-year cycle cost for a particular article, it turns out that the one-time costs are substantially different between print and electronic, about $4 million as opposed to $1 million. The ongoing costs are about the same, roughly $1.2 million apiece. And with the total cost around $5.5 million for the print and $2.3 million for the electronic. This is now over the life of those articles, or the journals that are. Now, looking at derived metrics, the performance, what we found is that the cost per title of processing the electronic titles was $170. The cost for processing the print titles is $330. The effectiveness, that is, there's 65 readings per electronic titles, 22 readings for print titles. And these are things that you can pass on to your administration. I mean, I think we've demonstrated nicely that the collections, library collections, have become very important and increasingly important to faculty. But when you think in terms of the effectiveness, it's certainly, the electronic collections are certainly very important. The cost effectiveness is around $3 per reading of electronic collections, around $13 per reading for current periodicals, and about $15 per print back files. Now, we also looked at the impact. The way in which we looked at that is what would happen if we didn't have a library? What would the readers do? They obviously, what we do is we ask them, would you, if you didn't have a library, would you get that article that you just read? About 20 to 25% of them said, no, I wouldn't bother. Some of them, the rest of them say, yes, I would go get that article. And when they do, we say, where would you get it and how much would it cost you to get that article? And then we compare that cost to the cost of the, what it cost them to have for reading from the library. The impact is saves around 49 hours per faculty member, about $4.2 million. Now the investment, in other words, the net benefit, that is, it would cost them about 49 hours per year more if you didn't have a library. Now, the investment is not just the cost of the library, but it is also the cost of the staff who, the faculty, the time of the faculty who are using the library. And if you look at that total cost, it comes out to be around $14 million. And notice how much more the cost, how much more they're paying to get access to that information. It's around $12 million. Whereas the cost of the library allocated, now we allocate that between the students' readings and the faculty reading, is around $1.7 million. So it is costing, what the faculty has says is they are willing to pay much more than it costs the library to provide that service. So the return on investment is, if you go back, 3.4 to 1. A little bit under the 4.1, but that's what we've observed over the. With public libraries, it was around 5.81 to 1. With special libraries, it was about 2.9 to 1, I believe. I should point out that with public libraries, the return on investment to taxpayers is substantially different than when you're looking at an academic library. For example, the investment involves the investment from the local, state, and federal governments, and it turns out that it's roughly $7.20 per visit. The return, the contingent valuation, was around $41 per visit. The net benefit was around around $28. And the thing is that the users of the public libraries said that they had savings due to the information they got. For example, they bought a car at a less price, or they obtained information that they could use to work around the house, doing house repair, something like that. So by the fact that they had information, ended up saving them some money. So that's an additional return on the investment. The other thing is that the library salaries contribute to the local community because they have taxes and they go out and buy and this kind of thing. So there's an economic return by having the staff there, and also the purchases. And the purchases of buying stuff is around $2 per visit. The salaries lost to the economy is around $5 and so on. They also have, public libraries have gift shops in the libraries, and those would be lost to the economy, and that's about 3 cents a visit. Now, there's also a halo effect, because what you find is in the public library environment is that people often come to the public library. When they do that, they also will go to a restaurant, or they go to a movie, or they'll go to a grocery store or something. In other words, they will come to do more than just visit the library. And there was a study done in England, the UK, where the librarians went on a strike for about 6 months to a year or something like that. And what they did is determine, when the libraries were closed, determine how the closing of the libraries affected the stores and the restaurants and so on. And it went down something like 23% or something like that. So I call that the halo effect. So there is a halo effect that's associated with a public library. Now, there was, when we did the statewide studies, we also asked an economic group called REMI, which is, I forget what it is, but they do that kind of top-down stuff. In other words, what they do is look at the kind of the ripple effect of the money that the libraries are spending and this kind of thing over around a 30-year period of time. And what they found is that the gross regional product, that is like the gross national product, actually increased about $379 per dollar of library funding.